SPARS pandemic of 2025, echo chambers and vaccine opposition. So if you're confused about what SPARS is, that's what we're going to tell you today. The SPARS pandemic, didn't you know? It's set for 2025. So this is actually another simulation. You're aware of how ridiculous it is that they can have these simulations that basically damn near exactly line out what's going to happen, and over and over and over it happens.
They came up with 4 different scenarios, they say, but they don't tell you what the other ones are. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but they chose to focus on what they called echo chamber, which is a world that leads to more internet access, more technological advances, but through that, a further insulating of different communities where people start isolating themselves and just creating echo chambers, kind of like we're seeing today, and just kind of putting themselves into little boxes where the only information they have to get is the information that they agree with, and just kind of reinforcing that view. And so that world is taking place at the same time as what they end up calling the SPARS pandemic takes place. Like, it's an outbreak of another coronavirus that sweeps around the world and basically wreaks havoc around the world, or at least that's the perception, from 2025 to 2028. And one of the ones I just want to say off the bat, I think it's the fact that this study or this simulation, it sort of anticipated this idea that the authorities would make a big deal about something and that people would respond and be obedient, but then after a while, people would start to question it, and that they're, of course, an anti-vaccine movement, and that ultimately the numbers would be way off, that the whole thing was exaggerated and it wasn't nearly as bad, and they kind of wrap up the whole exercise with like, oh, nobody wanted to hold anybody accountable or look backwards, and we all moved forward. And
they ultimately actually write down that, okay, so we were wrong. The people are upset about that. And how are we going to use this to control them? Or how are we going to manipulate it so they're not upset anymore? Like, they're openly talking about that. That's their objective, to manipulate the people so they're not upset about the obvious thing that they did wrong. And I mean, people can read it for themselves. It's very interesting. Talking about scientists who are pointing to scientific studies, and they're going, they don't believe in the scientific method. It's like, it's just illogical. But the point is that people don't care. Like the 2016 point. It's not about facts and truth, right? You say something that's in this box and, I was told not to think about that, and that's what this is. They're driving things that should be a benefit or a positive into this negative corner because it polarizes people as they're the ones polarizing people.
Study simulation exercise that the authorities overestimated the fatality rate. And they even, they say that they were inflated. They don't even just say they got it wrong. They said they inflated the numbers. And that the CDC originally estimated that SPARS fatality rate was 4.7%, while the WHO said something like 14 to 15% for people over 50, 50% for people over 64. So these really high numbers. And then later, of course, they admit that like a more accurate estimate would be 0.6%. And it's interesting, I can't remember if I included this in the article as I was kind of working through it progressively through the storyline, but they while they upfront admit like, okay, well, because since this is written from somebody in 2030, right? So they're reflecting back, and so they were reflecting back and saying, yeah, we got the numbers way wrong, we overestimated. But throughout the whole experiment, the whole simulation, they continue to tell the people the wrong number, even after they realize. So I mean, it's just so familiar to COVID and a lot of the things we're seeing as far as the CDC and the WHO now. I'm sure your audience, everybody is familiar, of course, that the fatality rate is below 1%, for most people.
Here. Yeah. So this is the government gaming out what they will do. All right. So don't forget about that, against people or with involving people. And they're basically saying, look, we told them this wrong number and then we got it wrong. Right. So think about how dumb it is that they game out that they got the numbers wrong. Like, why would you even do that? It's because you're seeding the idea to tie it with these things now and act like that's normal. Oh, well, even in their simulation, they got it wrong. It's like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And then, as you pointed out, they go forward as if it's the real number. They never really admit that to people. And it says right here, the report goes on to detail how public health and medical professionals were not successful in stopping the spread. And
it's this is why I thought, like, okay, this is a study that needs to get out there because it deals more specifically with how they're going to handle the vaccine response, the criticism of the vaccine, and admission that, again, neurological symptoms start showing up by the end of 2027. And it says after showing no adverse effects for nearly a year, several vaccine recipients, and I'm sure, several, who knows how many that was in the simulation, begin to show symptoms such as blurry vision, headaches, and numbness in their extremities. And they claim that, oh, by 2030, it's still unclear if the vaccines cause this or not.
Yeah, right there, exactly, right.
So,
And it's like,
I think that we'll probably see a response like this where there's not very much admission of guilt or personal, taking of responsibility. I think if anything, I hate to say it and this is just me speculating, but based on what we've seen, I think in the coming years, the people who are injured from vaccines, that it will be blamed again on the people who question the vaccines, that they'll try to find a way to say that things got so bad because people wouldn't wear the mask. And if they had worn the mask, then maybe we would have been able to, even though now they're saying nothing's going to go away till the vaccines get there, then it'll be like, well, the vaccines came, but we wouldn't have had to do that if people were locking down and masks.
As always. And